The girl moved slowly along the alley behind the office buildings, dragging a small, battered cart whose wheels squeaked with every step. Evening was settling in, the sky turning the color of old paper, and the windows above reflected tired faces finishing their workdays. For her, this was the best time. People threw things away when they were in a hurry to go home. Old folders, loose documents, broken binders, everything that could be sold by weight meant dinner, maybe even breakfast tomorrow. She was small for her age, thin, with hair always tied in a crooked ponytail. Her jacket was 2 sizes too big, found in a donation bin months ago, but it kept the cold out. She stopped near a dumpster, climbed onto a crate, and leaned inside. The smell of dust and ink mixed with food waste made her nose wrinkle, but she was used to it. She pulled out a stack of papers tied with a faded string. Usually she didn't look at what she collected. Words were words, numbers were numbers. But something about these papers made her pause. The paper felt thicker, newer. There were stamps in blue and red, official looking, like the ones she had once seen through the glass doors of an office. She untied the string and began flipping through them. Her lips moved silently as she read, slow but careful. She had learned to read at school before she stopped going regularly. Names repeated, but not in the way they should have. The same signature appeared again and again, always identical, like it had been printed, not written. Dates overlapped strangely. Contracts supposedly signed months apart referenced events that hadn't happened yet. Even to her untrained eyes, it felt wrong, like a puzzle with pieces forced together. She frowned, pressing the papers to her chest. Instinct told her these weren't trash. She imagined handing them over to the recycling man and felt a sudden tightness in her stomach, as if she were about to lose something important. Carefully, she wrapped the documents back up and placed them at the bottom of her cart, covering them with old magazines. That night, in the small room she shared with 2 other kids at the shelter, she couldn't sleep. The documents lay under her thin mattress. She kept thinking about the stamps, the repeated names, the strange dates. Adults always said children should mind their own business, but this felt like something bigger than her fear. Bigger even than hunger. The next morning, she washed her face at the sink, smoothing her hair as best she could. Her hands shook as she lifted the bundle. The office building loomed ahead, all glass and steel, reflecting a world that didn't include kids like her. She stood at the entrance for a long moment, watching people walk in confidently, holding briefcases and coffee cups. Finally, she stepped inside. The lobby smelled of polish and perfume. A security guard glanced at her, already frowning. "Hey, you can't be here," he said, waving her away. "I need to see the director," she said softly, but clearly. The guard laughed. "The director? Go on, run along." She tightened her grip on the papers. "Please. It's important." People passing by stared. Someone whispered. The girl felt heat crawl up her neck, but she didn't move. After a tense moment, a woman from reception approached, irritation on her face. "What is this about?" the woman asked. The girl held out the bundle. "These were in the trash." "They're wrong." The word sounded small, childish, but something in her eyes made the woman hesitate. She glanced at the papers, saw the stamps, and her expression changed just enough to matter. "Wait here," the woman said sharply. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The girl stood perfectly still, afraid that if she moved, they would throw her out. Finally, an elevator opened. And a tall man in a dark suit stepped out. His hair was silver at the temples, his posture rigid with authority. "This is her?" he asked. The woman nodded. The director looked down at the girl. "You found these?" She nodded, then pushed the papers toward him. They didn't look like trash. He took them, his brow furrowing as he flipped through the pages. At first his expression was polite, distant. Then his jaw tightened. He turned a page, then another, faster now. The color drained from his face. "Where exactly did you get these?" he asked quietly. "Behind the building," she answered. "In the dumpster." Silence spread through the lobby. The director closed the folder carefully, as if it might explode. He looked at the receptionist, then at the guard. "Get legal. Now," he said. The girl didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Something serious had been uncovered. She felt suddenly small again, like she had stepped into a storm she couldn't control. They led her to a small conference room and gave her a glass of juice. She held it with both hands, too nervous to drink. Through the glass walls, she saw people rushing, phones pressed to ears, faces tense. Hours passed. Questions came. Gentle ones at first, then more detailed. She answered honestly, explaining how she collected papers, how she noticed the stamps, how something felt wrong. No one interrupted her. For the first time in a long while, adults listened. By evening, police officers arrived. The director's voice echoed through the corridor, sharp with anger. Words like fraud, embezzlement, and cover up floated through the air. The girl didn't know their meanings, but she knew they were heavy, dangerous words. When it was finally over, the director returned to the conference room. He sat across from her, no longer towering, just a tired man with deep lines on his face. "You did something very brave today," he said. She shrugged, eyes downcast. "I just didn't want to throw them away." He smiled sadly. "Sometimes that's all it takes." He asked about her life, where she lived, if she went to school. She answered carefully, embarrassed but honest. The director listened without judgment. A week later, everything changed. The investigation made headlines. Several high-ranking employees were arrested. The company's reputation survived only because the fraud had been stopped in time. Reporters wanted to talk to the girl, but the director refused, protecting her from the noise. Instead, he visited the shelter himself. He brought papers this time too, but these were different. Official, clean, filled with possibilities. A scholarship. A place at a good school. Support for as long as she needed it. When he handed them to her, her hands trembled again, but this time from something warmer than fear. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. He shook his head. "No, thank you. You reminded us what honesty looks like." That night, lying on her bed, the girl stared at the ceiling. The future, once a blur of dumpsters and cold mornings, now had shape. It wasn't easy. It wasn't guaranteed. But it was real. And all because she had looked at a piece of trash and decided it mattered. The girl walked slowly along the narrow service road behind the business district, her small cart rattling over cracks in the asphalt. The sun was already low, stretching long shadows from the tall buildings, and the glass walls reflected a world that seemed distant and unreachable. This was her usual route. She knew which offices emptied their trash on which days, which dumpsters were locked, and which guards pretended not to see her. For her, this knowledge meant survival. Her name was barely spoken by anyone these days, so in her own mind she simply thought of herself as, me. She was 9, though hunger and cold had made her look younger. Her fingers were rough from paper cuts and metal edges, but she didn't complain. Each bundle of paper was a step closer to a meal, each kilogram a small victory. She stopped behind a tall gray building where the dumpsters were always full of office waste. Climbing onto an old wooden pallet, she leaned over and began pulling things out. Broken folders, outdated calendars, stacks of printed emails no one needed anymore. She worked quickly, automatically, until her hand touched something different. A thick folder, heavy, sealed with a string. She hesitated. Heavy usually meant more money, but it also meant effort. She tugged it free and almost dropped it. Papers slid out, fluttering like startled birds. She cursed softly and knelt to gather them before the wind carried them away. As she stacked the pages together, her eyes caught a glimpse of a bold stamp, dark blue, sharp. She had seen stamps like that before, on official notices taped to walls. Her curiosity stirred. She sat back on her heels and began flipping through the papers. She read slowly, sounding out the words in her head. Contracts. Amounts of money that felt unreal to her. Numbers with too many zeros. Company names repeated again and again, but the addresses were different. The same signature appeared on multiple documents, identical every time, down to the smallest curve. Even she knew no human hand wrote exactly the same way twice. Her brow furrowed. She turned another page. Dates didn't line up. One contract referred to a meeting that supposedly happened after the agreement was signed. Another mentioned equipment delivered months before it had been manufactured. The girl felt a strange chill crawl up her spine. She looked around instinctively, as if someone might be watching her read trash. The alley was empty. Still, she lowered her voice, whispering the words to herself, trying to understand. Something was wrong. She didn't know what, but the feeling was strong enough to make her stomach ache. Normally she would have tied the papers back up and tossed them into her cart. Paper was paper. But her hands refused to move. She imagined the recycling man weighing them, tossing them into a pile, shredding them until nothing was left. The thought made her chest tighten. Carefully, she gathered the documents, straightened the edges, and tied the string back around them. She placed the folder at the bottom of her cart and covered it with old newspapers, as if hiding a secret. That night, the shelter was loud. Someone cried in their sleep, another child coughed endlessly. The girl lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. The folder was hidden beneath her thin mattress, pressing into her back. Every time she shifted, she felt it there, reminding her of its presence. She tried to convince herself it was nothing. Adults made mistakes all the time. Maybe she was imagining things. But the stamps, the dates, the signatures, her mind kept circling back to them. She remembered her teacher once saying that details mattered, that noticing small things could change big outcomes. At the time, she hadn't believed it. By morning, she had made a decision. She washed her face, combed her hair with her fingers, and put on her cleanest shirt, though it was still faded and too big. The walk to the building felt longer than usual. With each step, her confidence wavered. What if they laughed at her? What if she got in trouble for taking papers from the trash? What if she was wrong? The entrance to the building was wide and bright, guarded by shiny doors that opened automatically. She stopped just outside, heart pounding. People streamed past her, barely glancing down. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. Cool air hit her face. The floor shone like a mirror. She felt every eye on her, though most people were too busy to care. A security guard noticed her almost immediately. "Hey," he said sharply. "You lost. I need to talk to someone," she replied, holding the folder tightly. "About what?" "These papers." He glanced at them and snorted. "You can't be here. Go on." "I need to see the director," she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. The guard laughed openly now. "The director? Kid, get out of here." She didn't move. Her legs trembled, but she stayed where she was. People slowed, curious. A woman at the reception desk frowned and came over. "What's going on?" she asked. The guard shrugged. "She says she wants to see the director." The woman looked down at the girl, annoyed, then noticed the stamps on the folder. Her expression shifted, just slightly. "What's in there?" she asked. "I found them in the trash," the girl said. "They're strange." The word sounded weak, but the woman took the folder anyway. She opened it, skimmed a page, then another. Her lips pressed together. "Wait here," she said, already walking away. Minutes passed. The girl stood alone in the middle of the lobby, feeling exposed. The guard watched her closely now, less amused. Finally, an elevator dinged, and a man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, with tired eyes and a perfectly tailored suit. "This is the child?" he asked the receptionist. "Yes." He crouched slightly to look at the girl. "You brought these?" She nodded and held out the folder. He took it and began reading. At first, his face showed polite curiosity. Then confusion. Then something darker. He flipped pages faster, his jaw tightening. "Where did you get these?" he asked quietly. "In the dumpster behind the building," she answered. The man straightened. "How long ago?" "Yesterday evening." He closed the folder carefully and looked around the lobby. "No one leaves this area," he said sharply. "Call legal. Call internal audit." The air seemed to change instantly. Phones came out. Voices dropped. The girl felt her courage draining away, replaced by fear. Had she done something wrong? They took her to a small meeting room and offered her juice and a sandwich. She ate slowly, hands shaking. Through the glass walls, she saw adults moving quickly, faces tense. Words she didn't understand floated through the air, heavy and urgent. They asked her questions: where she lived, how she found the papers, if anyone had told her to bring them. She answered honestly. No one accused her. No one raised their voice. Hours later, police arrived. The director's face was pale with anger. He argued quietly with another man, then nodded sharply. The girl felt like she was watching a storm from behind glass. When everything finally slowed, the director returned to the room and sat across from her. He looked older now, the lines on his face deeper. "You did the right thing," he said. She stared at her hands. "Am I in trouble?" He shook his head. "No. You helped us. You may have saved a lot of people from serious consequences." She didn't understand how trash papers could do that, but she nodded. Over the next few days, the building buzzed with activity. Employees were questioned. Offices were sealed. News spread quickly. The girl returned to her routine, but something had changed. People at the shelter treated her differently, with curiosity and quiet respect. A week later, the director came to the shelter himself. He sat at a small table with her. No suit this time, just a simple jacket. He asked about her life, her school, her dreams. No one had asked her that before. When he handed her a folder, her breath caught. Inside were papers, real ones this time. A scholarship. A place at a school she had only seen from a distance. Support, counseling, meals, safety. "I don't know why you're doing this," she whispered. He smiled softly. "Because you reminded us that honesty can come from anywhere." That night, lying in her bed, the girl held the folder to her chest. The future no longer felt like a dark alley behind tall buildings. It was still uncertain, still hard, but it was open. And it all began because she had looked at something others had thrown away and chosen to care. The girl moved through the narrow passage between two tall office buildings as if she were part of the evening routine, unnoticed and expected, like the hum of distant traffic or the flicker of lights turning on floor by floor. Her small cart rattled softly behind her, one wheel slightly bent, forcing her to pull it at an angle. She had learned how to manage it so it wouldn't tip over, even when it was full. Experience taught quickly when mistakes meant going hungry. The sun was already slipping behind the skyline, painting the sky in dusty orange and gray. This was the best time to work. Office workers were finishing their days, clearing desks, throwing away things they no longer needed. For them, it was garbage. For her, it was survival. She stopped behind a familiar building, one she visited twice a week. The security guard there usually pretended not to see her, as long as she didn't make a mess. She climbed onto a broken wooden pallet and leaned into the dumpster, ignoring the smell. Her hands moved quickly, sorting by touch more than sight. Paper to one side, plastic to another, metal last. A stack of old reports went into the cart. Then a torn binder. Then loose sheets covered in charts and emails. Nothing unusual. Just weight. Her hand brushed against something solid and heavy. She pulled, frowning as a thick folder slid free, bound with a string and wrapped in plastic. It was cleaner than everything else, barely touched by dirt or food waste. That alone was strange. She untied the string carefully, afraid of tearing the pages. As she flipped through them, her lips moved silently. Reading had never come easily to her, but she tried, sounding out words in her head, piecing together meaning bit by bit. The first thing she noticed were the stamps. Official stamps, crisp and dark. Then the signatures. The same name appeared again and again, always written in exactly the same way. She tilted the paper, studying it. Her teacher's voice echoed faintly in her memory, saying that no two signatures were ever perfectly identical. She turned another page. Numbers jumped out at her. Huge sums she could barely imagine. Dates followed, but they felt wrong. One document referenced an event that hadn't happened yet. Another listed a delivery date earlier than the manufacturing date. Her brow furrowed. She sat back, heart beating faster. She didn't know much about contracts or companies, but she knew this didn't make sense. It felt like when a story didn't add up, when someone lied and forgot what they'd said before. For a long moment, she just stared at the papers, listening to the distant sounds of the city. A laugh echoed somewhere above, followed by the closing of a window. Life went on, unaware. She could still put the folder back. Toss it into the cart, sell it by weight, forget she'd ever seen it. That would be the easy choice. But something inside her resisted. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was the quiet sense that some things mattered, even if you were small and poor and invisible. She retied the string and tucked the folder carefully at the bottom of her cart, covering it with newspapers. Her hands trembled slightly as she did it. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The shelter was noisy, as always, but even when it grew quiet, her mind stayed awake. The folder lay beneath her mattress, pressing into her back. Every time she shifted, she felt it, like a reminder she couldn't ignore. She wondered what would happen if she took it back to the building. She imagined guards shouting at her, people laughing, doors closing in her face. She imagined being accused of stealing, even though it had been in the trash. She also imagined doing nothing, letting it disappear. The thought made her chest feel tight. By morning, the decision had settled inside her, heavy but clear. She washed her face at the sink, smoothing her hair with wet fingers. She chose the cleanest clothes she had, though they were still worn and too big. She picked up the folder and held it against her chest as she walked. The building looked different in the daylight, taller, colder. Glass reflected the sky, hiding whatever went on inside. She stopped at the entrance, watching people pass through the doors without slowing. They belonged there. She didn't. Her legs shook as she stepped inside. Cool air washed over her. The floor gleamed. Her shoes squeaked, and she immediately felt every eye turn toward her. A security guard noticed her almost at once. "Hey," he called. "You can't be in here. I need to talk to someone," she said quietly. He glanced at her clothes, then at the folder. "About what?" "These papers." He laughed. "Go on, kid. This isn't the place. I need to see the director," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. The guard shook his head, amused. "That's funny." She didn't move. People slowed, curious. The attention made her cheeks burn, but she stood her ground. A woman from the reception desk approached, clearly annoyed. "What's happening?" "She says she wants to see the director," the guard said. The woman sighed, then looked at the folder. The stamps caught her eye. She reached out. "Let me see that." She opened it, flipping through a few pages. Her expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. "Wait here," she said sharply, already turning away. Time stretched. The girl stood alone in the lobby, clutching the strap of her cart. The guard watched her now, no longer laughing. Minutes passed. Then more. Finally, the elevator opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, with gray at his temples and a posture that made people straighten instinctively. "This is the child?" he asked. "Yes," the receptionist replied. He looked down at her. "You brought these documents." She nodded and held out the folder. He took it, skimming quickly. At first his face showed mild curiosity. Then confusion. Then alarm. He flipped pages faster, his jaw tightening. "Where did you find these?" he asked quietly. "In the dumpster behind the building," she said. His eyes flicked up sharply. He closed the folder. "How long ago?" "Yesterday evening." He straightened and looked around the lobby. "Call legal. Call internal audit. Now." The mood shifted instantly. Phones came out. Voices dropped. The girl's courage faltered, replaced by fear. Had she made a mistake? They led her to a small conference room and gave her juice and a sandwich. She ate slowly, hands shaking. Through the glass walls, she saw people moving quickly, tension visible in their movements. Questions followed. Gentle but thorough. How did she find the papers? Did anyone tell her to bring them? Where did she live? She answered honestly, even when it was embarrassing. Hours passed. Police arrived. Offices were locked. The director argued quietly with another man, his voice tight with anger. Words like fraud and forged contracts drifted through the air. The girl felt like she had stepped into something far bigger than herself. When everything finally slowed, the director returned to the room. He looked tired now, older. "You did the right thing," he said. She stared at her hands. "I thought I'd get in trouble." He shook his head. "No. You showed more integrity than many adults in this building." She didn't fully understand the word, but she liked the way he said it. Days passed. The investigation spread. People were arrested. News trucks appeared outside the building. The director made sure her name stayed out of the press. Life at the shelter felt different. The adults whispered. The other kids looked at her with a mix of awe and disbelief. A week later, the director came to see her. He sat across from her at a small table, no suit this time, just a simple jacket. He asked about her life, her school, what she liked, what she feared. No one had ever listened like that before. When he handed her a folder, her breath caught. Inside were documents. Not trash, not mistakes, but opportunities. A scholarship. A place at a school. Support she'd never imagined. I don't know why you're doing this, she whispered. He smiled softly. Because you reminded us that honesty doesn't depend on status. That night, lying in her bed, she held the folder close. The future no longer felt like a narrow alley behind tall buildings. It was still uncertain, still difficult, but it was real. All because she had looked at something others threw away and decided it mattered.